He was the king of Wall Street. She was the girl from nowhere. At their lavish Hamptons wedding in front of the Vanderbilts and the Astors, he looked at her simple handmade dress and laughed. He called it a rag, a disgrace to his name. But he didn't know the secret stitched into its seams, a secret worth not millions but billions. What happens when the laughter dies, and the world learns that the woman he'd just humiliated could buy and sell his entire legacy with the stroke of a pen? Her revenge wasn't just coming. It was already served. The air at the Sebenak Golf Club in Southampton was thick with the scent of money salt and the delicate perfume of 1,000 white hydrangeas. It was the rarefied air of the 0.01%, a climate-controlled atmosphere where fortunes were murmured into existence over gin and tonics, and legacies were as meticulously manicured as the putting greens that rolled toward the glittering Atlantic. Today, that air was also crackling with the high-voltage electricity of a major social event, the wedding of Alaric Vaughan, the 34-year-old wunderkind of Wall Street, to a woman no one had ever heard of, Ada Waverley. Alaric Vaughan was not merely a man. He was a brand, a myth in the making. With a sharp jawline that looked engineered for success and a smile that could close a billion-dollar deal or break a heart with equal chilling ease, he was the closest thing to royalty America had. His firm, Vaughan Capital, was a gleaming predator with its tentacles wrapped around every significant market from New York to Hong Kong. He didn't just participate in the market, he moved it. And today, in front of God and Stephen A. Schwartzman, he was capturing his most mysterious prize. The guest list was a testament to his power, a meticulously curated ecosystem of influence. Schwartzman. The Blackstone Titan himself held a crystal glass of champagne, speaking in low, confidential tones to a senator whose campaign Vaughan Capital had generously supported. Across the lawn, near a cascading ice sculpture of a swan, a few scions of the Lauder family chatted with a revered art collector, their laughter tinkling like the diamonds at their throats. This wasn't a wedding. It was a consolidation of power, a celebration of Alaric's gravitational pull in the universe of the ultra-wealthy. And then there was Ada. She stood near the grand arch of white roses where the ceremony would soon take place, a solitary, quiet figure in a world of glittering, performative magnificence. She was beautiful, undeniably so, but her beauty was of a different dialect than the one spoken here. It was the quiet, unassuming beauty of a wild flower in a hothouse of genetically engineered orchids. Her hair, a cascade of dark chestnut, was simply tied back with an ivory ribbon, and her face, devoid of the heavy, sculpted makeup favored by the other women, was luminous with a nervous, genuine excitement. But it was her dress that caused the whispers, the subtle, venomous static beneath the string quartet's melody. In a sea of Vera Wang, Oscar de la Renta, and custom Giambattista Valli. Ada's dress was an act of quiet, baffling rebellion. It was simple, devastatingly, unforgivably simple. Made of a soft, unadorned ivory silk that flowed around her like liquid moonlight, it had long fitted saloparts and a modest, graceful neckline. There was no beading, no lace, no dramatic 20-foot train. It was beautiful, but it was the kind of austere beauty one appreciated in a museum, not on the bride of Alaric Vaughan. It was an understatement in a world that abhorred the very concept. "Is that it?" whispered Beatrice Ellington, a real estate heiress whose own wedding dress had once been featured in Vogue for its sheer audacity and carat count. She fanned herself with the heavy cardstock of her program, her diamond-encrusted bracelet catching the afternoon sun. "It looks homemade." The word was pronounced as if it were a terminal illness. Her companion, a smirking, banking heir, named Carter Hayes, Alaric's best man, snorted softly into his champagne flute. "I heard she's from somewhere in Oregon. Probably grew the silkworms herself and bartered for the thread with a bundle of firewood." The snickers spread like a contagion through the perfectly coiffed crowd. The dress was a statement, but no one could decipher what it was trying to say. It was a blank page in a library of ornate leather-bound tomes, and it was making them all deeply uncomfortable. From across the lawn, Alaric's mother, Meredith Vaughan, a woman sculpted from ice and ambition, glided towards her son. Her own gown was a masterpiece of silver embroidery, a testament to her status, and her necklace, the famed Vaughan diamonds, glittered malevolently at her throat. She moved with the predatory grace of a shark, and she had scented blood in the water. "Alaric, darling," she began, her voice a silken weapon that could strip flesh from bone. "A word. Have you seen her dress?" Alaric was holding court with a group of his partners from the firm, laughing the picture of a man on top of the world. He turned his eyes, scanning the crowd with proprietary warmth until they landed on his bride-to-be. His smile faltered just for a second, a barely perceptible glitch in his polished programming. He had seen the dress before, of course. A week ago, in the privacy of their penthouse overlooking Central Park, she had shown it to him, her eyes shining with pride. He'd barely glanced at it, distracted by a conference call with Tokyo. He'd assumed it was a preliminary sketch, a muslin mock-up. He hadn't in his wildest dreams imagined this was the final product. "It's minimalist," he said the word, tasting foreign and unpleasant on his tongue. He was a man of maximalist tastes, bigger deals, faster cars, taller buildings. Minimalism was a disease of the poor. Meredith's lips tightened into a bloodless line. "It's a dishcloth, Alaric. An expensive silk dishcloth, perhaps, but a dishcloth nonetheless. The photographers from Town and Country and Vogue are here. What are they supposed to photograph? The purity of her intentions. Your project of turning a country mouse into a city socialite is far from complete, it seems." The barb hit its mark. Alaric's jaw clenched. He had built his empire on the bedrock of perception. Image was everything. His parties, his acquisitions, his women. They were all meticulously chosen extensions of the Alaric Vaughan brand. And his bride, the ultimate acquisition, was wearing a dress that looked like it cost less than the floral arrangements. He felt a surge of hot, violent anger. It was an act of defiance, an act of disrespect. Ada, for her part, seemed oblivious to the growing storm of whispers. She was speaking with the only person she truly knew there, a kind-faced, impeccably dressed woman in her 60s named Martha, who had been her guardian for most of her life. Martha, in her simple but elegant navy suit, was a small island of warmth in this cold sea of judgment. "You look breathtaking, my dear," Martha said, her voice a soothing anchor. "It is exactly as you designed it. Your mother would be so proud." "Thank you, Martha," Ada replied, her smile radiant and genuine. "It feels right. It feels like me." Just then, Alaric excused himself from his partners, his own smile now a tight, dangerous baring of teeth. He began to walk towards Ada. The crowd watched, a palpable sense of anticipation rippling through them. The pre-show entertainment was about to begin. This was better than the stock market. This was a hostile takeover of a wedding. As he approached, Ada's face lit up, her love for him so nakedly apparent It was almost painful to watch. The change in her was instantaneous and absolute. Her posture softened. Her eyes shone, her entire being oriented itself towards him, like a flower to the sun. "Alaric, is it time?" He didn't smile back. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, raked over her, from the simple knot in her hair down to the hem of the plain, offensive dress. The light in Ada's expression flickered, dimmed, and was replaced by a small, furrowed line of confusion. This was not the adoring gaze of her fiancé. This was the cold assessment of a disappointed CEO. "What is this, Ada?" he asked. His voice was low and tight, meant only for her, but carrying the unmistakable weight of public condemnation. "What is what?" she asked, her hand instinctively going to the soft silk of her gown, a gesture of protection. "It's my dress. Do you like it?" "No," he said, stepping closer, his tall frame casting a shadow over her. "This is a joke. Is your real dress coming? Are you planning some sort of dramatic late entrance? Because this little stunt is not amusing." Her heart began to beat, a painful, heavy rhythm against her ribs. The ambient noise of the party seemed to fade into a dull roar. My real dress, Alaric. This is my real dress. I showed it to you last week, remember?" "I remember you showing me a piece of fabric. I thought it was a draft. I thought you were working with a designer. I offered to fly in Virginie Viard from Chanel. I gave you a black Amex with no conceivable limit, and you show up to our wedding." "My wedding?" he emphasized, in front of all these people wearing a bedsheet. "Do you have any idea how this looks? Do you understand what you've done?" The color drained from Ada's face. She could feel the collective gaze of the guests on her back, a physical pressure. She could see them out of the corner of her eye, the glint of their phones, the smirks on their perfectly lipsticked mouths. They were feasting on her humiliation. It's what I wanted," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. The dress had felt so right, so her. Now it felt like a costume of shame. "It has meaning to me." "Meaning?" he scoffed, and this time he didn't bother to lower his voice. He let out a short, sharp laugh that was utterly devoid of humor, a sound of pure, cutting derision. It echoed in the sudden quiet. What possible meaning could a plain rag like this have? "Did you make it in your quaint little village to save money? Is this some sort of passive-aggressive statement about the evils of capitalism? Because let me tell you, sweetheart, you are about to marry capitalism incarnate. You're about to become Mrs. Alaric Vaughan. And Mrs. Alaric Vaughan does not wear rags." He turned his head slightly, a deliberate theatrical gesture, just enough to catch the eye of Carter Hayes, who gave him a subtle approving nod. He was performing for them now. He was reasserting his dominance, showing them all that he was not diminished by this baffling beige woman. He was still the king, and the king would not be embarrassed. Tears welled in Ada's eyes, hot and stinging. The public cruelty was a physical blow. She had seen him be ruthless in business, had watched him eviscerate opponents on conference calls. She had told herself that was his armor, his work persona. But she had never ever believed he would turn that cold fury on her. The Alaric she knew, or thought she knew, was the man who brought her coffee in the morning, who held her when she had nightmares about losing her parents, who told her she was the calm in his storm, the only real thing in his life. This man, this stranger with the cruel eyes and the mocking smile, was not him. This was the real Alaric. The other was the facade. "Alaric, please!" she begged, her voice breaking on a sob she couldn't contain. "Don't do this. Not here. Not now." "Oh, here is the only place it matters." He shot back, his voice like a whip. "You wanted to make a statement with this dress, Ada. Well, congratulations, you've made one. You've announced to the entire world that you have no idea what it means to be a part of this family, of this life. You've embarrassed me, and you've embarrassed yourself." He didn't wait for a reply. He spun on his heel, a clean, dismissive motion, and walked back towards the altar. He signaled to the wedding planner with a sharp, angry gesture. "Let's get this farce over with." Ada stood frozen, the world dissolving around her into a painful, humming blur of pastel colors and cruel, staring faces. The love she had felt for him, so bright and overwhelming just minutes before, curdled in her chest. It was a swift, brutal death. The pain was immense, but as it crested, something else rose in its place. An incredible, absolute clarity. Martha rushed to her side, her face a mask of fury and concern. "Ada, my child, that man is a monster. We can leave, right now." But Ada barely heard her. The hot tears receded, and a strange, cold calm began to settle over her, extinguishing the fire of her pain. It was the calm of a general assessing a battlefield, of a CEO deciding the fate of a failing company. He thought this was about a dress. He thought this was about his reputation. He had no idea what this was about. She looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing the flawless, simple seam on her sleeve. Her mother had designed this. The note that had come with the fabric delivered by Martha had read, "For my Ada. May this dress remind you that true strength needs no adornment. It is woven within you." This dress wasn't a statement about capitalism. It was a statement about character. It was a legacy, a story, a secret she had planned to share with Alaric tonight, in the intimacy of their wedding night, as her ultimate gift of trust. A story that began not in a quaint village in Oregon, but in a world of unimaginable wealth that dwarfed his own. A world he had just trampled on with his designer shoes. He had judged the cover, and in doing so had forfeited the right to ever read the book. The flustered wedding planner scurried up to her, her clipboard trembling. "Miss Waverley, Mrs. Vaughan? It's time. The music is starting." Ada lifted her chin. She looked past the planner, her eyes locking onto Alaric, who stood at the altar, looking impatient, a king waiting for his defective tribute to be presented. He thought he had won. He thought he had put the little nobody from Oregon in her place. He had no idea that he had just signed the worst deal of his life. She took a deep breath, the salt-tinged air filling her lungs, cleansing them of her last shred of love for him. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and steady, all trace of a tremor gone. "It's time." And as she began to walk down the aisle across the perfectly manicured lawn towards the man who had just publicly shredded her heart, she was no longer a shy, nervous bride. She was the inheritor of a silent empire, and the war had just begun. Her simple dress was not a white flag of surrender. It was her armor. Ada's walk down that green aisle was a journey through a frozen moment in time. The sweet romantic strains of Pachelbel's canon, played by a string quartet flown in from Vienna, seemed to mock her. Each note was a crystalline shard of the beautiful future she had imagined now shattering around her. The faces in the crowd turned to watch her approach, a gallery of the world's most powerful people. She saw them not as individuals, but as a single entity of judgment. Beatrice Ellington's smug smirk, Carter Hayes's look of triumphant pity, Alaric's mother, Meredith, whose expression was one of cold, vindicated disdain. They were vultures, and she was the feast. With every step, the fiery pain in her chest cooled, hardening into something else. It was the alchemical transformation of love into purpose. The naive girl who had fallen for a charismatic titan was being burned away, and from the ashes a queen was rising. She had come to this wedding to join her life with a man. She now realized she was here to claim an empire. Her empire. And he was just the first acquisition. She kept her eyes locked on Alaric. He stood at the altar, a perfect specimen of power and privilege, but she could see the cracks in his facade, the impatience in the way he shifted his weight, the flicker of annoyance in his eyes that the farce was taking so long. As she drew closer, his expression changed. The confident anger gave way to a sliver of confusion. He was expecting tears. He was expecting a broken, humiliated bride he could graciously forgive in front of his audience. He was not expecting this woman, this stranger with a spine of steel and eyes that held the cold, clear light of reckoning. She reached the altar. Alaric took her hand. His grasp meant to be firm and possessive, but she felt the slight tremor in his fingers. His confidence was a performance, and he had just forgotten his lines. "Ada," he whispered, his voice a low, urgent hiss, searching her face for the woman he recognized. "Are you all right?" She met his gaze, her own expression unreadable. "I've never been better," she replied, her voice as crisp and cool as the evening air rolling in from the Atlantic. The warmth he was used to was gone, replaced by a polished chill. The officiant, a retired judge whose career had been made possible by Vaughan family connections, cleared his throat and launched into his well-rehearsed script. He spoke of love, of trust, of partnership, of two becoming one. The words were a bitter irony, hollow platitudes washing over Ada without leaving a mark. She stood perfectly still, a marble statue in a simple silk dress, her composure so absolute it was unnerving. When it came time for the vows, Alaric, recovering his footing, recited his with practiced theatrical ease. The words were beautiful, promising eternal devotion, a lifetime of protection, a partnership of equals. They were the words of the man she thought she was marrying, not the man who had called her dress a rag just moments before. He finished a confident smirk, returning to his face as if his eloquent lies could erase his cruel truths. Then the officiant turned to her. "Ada, do you have vows you would like to share?" She had them, of course. Vows she had written and rewritten, tear-stained pages, filled with promises of her own, full of hope and a deep, true love. She let them burn to ash in her memory. She looked directly at Alaric, her gaze so direct and unflinching that he involuntarily took a half-step back. "Ada," she began, her voice ringing out with startling clarity, each word a perfectly placed stone. "Take you, Alaric, to be my husband. I promise to give you exactly what you deserve." A ripple went through the first few rows. That wasn't in the script. Meredith Vaughan stiffened her eyes, narrowing. "I will honor the commitments we have made today," Ada continued, "and I expect you to do the same. I will be your partner in all things, in the way that I see fit. I will share with you my life, my future, and my assets." She paused on that final word, letting it hang in the air, charged with a meaning no one yet understood. "From this day forward," she concluded, her voice dropping slightly, "for as long as our contract shall last." Contract. The word landed like a gauntlet thrown down. Alaric's face tightened, a muscle jumping in his jaw. This was not the vow of a loving bride. It was the declaration of a hostile takeover. The stunned officiant, flustered quickly, prompted them. "The rings." Alaric's hand trembled as he took the platinum band and slipped it onto her finger. His touch was cold and clammy. When Ada took his ring, her hand was rock steady. She slid the ring onto his finger with a firm, final pressure. It was not a caress. It was a branding. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." The officiant rushed, his relief palpable. "You may kiss the bride." Alaric turned to her, his face a storm of anger and bewilderment. He leaned in, intending a possessive, punishing kiss to reassert his dominance. But Ada met him halfway, her lips pressed against his for a single, bloodless moment. There was no passion, no love, no submission. It was the cool, dry sealing of a deal, a corporate merger. The reception that followed was a masterclass in social tension. The opulent marquee, designed to foster celebration, felt like a courtroom. Guests clustered in small, anxious groups. Their laughter brittled their eyes, darting constantly to the bridal table, where Ada sat with the serene posture of a queen sipping water, while Alaric downed champagne like a man trying to extinguish a fire. He tried to play it off his charm on overdrive. "Quite the poet, my wife." He'd laugh to a guest who offered congratulations, his voice a little too loud. "Likes to keep me on my toes." But no one was buying it. They had all seen the public evisceration and the bride's chilling surgical response. After an hour of this suffocating performance, Ada excused herself. She glided through the room, feeling the stares like insects crawling on her skin. She wasn't headed for the dance floor. She had a meeting to attend. In the lavish powder room with its Venetian mirrors and bowls of floating gardenias, she found exactly who she expected to find. Meredith Vaughan stood with her arms crossed, a warrior queen surveying her domain. "What precisely was that?" she demanded, foregoing any preamble. "Our contract shall last. You turned my son's wedding into a laughingstock. You embarrassed him. You embarrassed this family." Ada met her gaze in the mirror, the reflection showing two formidable women, one fighting for a legacy, the other about to claim one. "I thought you'd be pleased, Meredith," Ada said, her tone smooth as polished glass. "Alaric made it very clear that this marriage is about perception, a business transaction. I was simply clarifying the terms of our agreement in a public forum so there would be no misunderstandings." Meredith was momentarily stunned by the audacity. "You are an ungrateful, manipulative little—" "Be very careful what you say next," Ada interrupted, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. She turned from the mirror to face her mother-in-law directly. "You operate under a series of assumptions, Meredith. About me, about my place in this world, about your own power. Every single one of them is wrong. You have no idea who I am. But you will, and you will regret this day." Before the furious Meredith could formulate a retort, the door opened, and Martha entered, her warm, intelligent face a stark contrast to the icy standoff. She assessed the scene in an instant. "Meredith," Martha said, her tone impeccably polite, but underlined with steel, "I believe the bride needs a moment alone, with her family." The emphasis on family was a clear, calculated dismissal. Meredith shot a look of pure venom at Ada, then gave a disdainful sniff and swept from the room, a galleon retreating from a battle it had unexpectedly lost. The moment the door closed, Ada's perfect composure cracked just for a second. She leaned against the marble vanity, the cold stone seeping through the silk. Martha was there immediately, her arms wrapping around Ada in a fierce protective hug. "Are you all right, my child?" Martha whispered. "That was difficult." Ada let out a shuddering breath, the breath she'd been holding since Alaric had first sneered at her dress. "He's worse than we thought, Martha," she murmured into her guardian's shoulder. "The cruelty. It was so easy for him. So natural." "Some men are like that," Martha said, her voice a soothing balm. "They build their empires on foundations of sand, and they are terrified of anyone who brings a single drop of water near it. They mistake kindness for weakness. It is a fatal flaw." She pulled back her eyes, serious, but shining with pride. "But the plan is in motion. Mr. Dubois confirmed everything an hour ago, just as you instructed. It's done." From her small, elegant clutch, Martha retrieved a slim, vintage Mont Blanc fountain pen. It was deceptively simple, black, with a single gold band. "Your father's," she said, softly, placing it in Ada's hand. The metal was cool and heavy. "He signed his first major deal with this pen, and his last. It seems fitting you should have it tonight." Ada closed her fingers around the pen. It felt like a scepter. It felt like a weapon. The last of her grief for the man she thought she loved solidified into resolve. "It's time, then." "It's time," Martha confirmed. "They are about to start the speeches. Alaric's best man is first. Then I will speak, and then the world changes." Ada took one last look at her reflection. The woman staring back was a stranger, forged in the fire of a single afternoon's cruelty. Her eyes were clear, her purpose absolute. The simple dress was her uniform. She was ready. She walked back to the bridal table and sat down, her movements fluid and confident. She placed her father's pen on the white linen tablecloth beside her plate, a deliberate symbolic act. Alaric leaned over his face, a mask of controlled fury, his voice a low growl. What the hell was that in the ceremony? And with my mother? "Do you think you can humiliate me and my family and get away with it?" Ada didn't look at him. She picked up the pen, her fingers tracing the elegant lines of its design. "This isn't about humiliation, Alaric," she said, her voice calm and measured. "This is about education." Just then, a loud clinking of a glass cut through the murmur of the room. Carter Hayes stood, that smug, punchable grin plastered on his face. "Friends," he boomed. Ada looked up, her gaze meeting Alaric's. A faint, knowing smile touched her lips. "And class is now in session." Carter Hayes hoisted his champagne flute, his face glowing with the smug sheen of inherited wealth and expensive liquor. He tapped the microphone, the sound echoing slightly, and a hush fell over the marquee. He was a man who loved an audience. "Friends, Vaughans, titans of industry," he began, his voice booming. "For those who don't know me, I'm Carter Hayes, and I've had the distinct pleasure and occasional terror of riding shotgun with this madman Alaric Vaughan since our days trying to figure out which fork to use at Wharton." A wave of practiced polite laughter rolled through the guests. Alaric grinned, leaning back in his chair, the picture of a king in his court. Ada sat beside him, still and silent, her face a serene mask. "We've seen it all," Carter continued, gesturing expansively with his flute. "All-nighters that turned into all-weekers. Deals that were dead on arrival until Alaric breathed fire into them, and parties that probably violated international law. This man doesn't just climb mountains, he builds them and then sells the naming rights." More laughter, this time more genuine. Carter had them. He turned his gaze, a predator spotting its prey, toward Ada. "And now he's conquered his final frontier marriage. To the lovely Ada." He paused, letting the name hang in the air as if it were a foreign object. We were all, shall we say, intrigued when Alaric told us he was settling down, and with such a sweet, simple girl from somewhere out west with lots of trees, I believe. He gave a theatrical wink. But I have to say, Ada, you've got spirit. His smile was a slash of condescension. And that dress, a bold statement. In a room full of peacocks, you've chosen to be a lovely, pure white dove. A testament to your thrifty roots, I'm sure. It's refreshing. We can all learn a thing or two about fiscal responsibility. He raised his glass higher. But don't you worry. We're all looking forward to Alaric teaching you how the other half, the better half, lives. To Alaric and his most ambitious project yet. To Ada. The insult, wrapped in the thinnest veil of a toast, landed with precision. The room fell into a tense, awkward silence before a few of Alaric's cronies began to applaud a cue for others to join in. Alaric, basking in the glow of his friend's backhanded tribute, threw his head back and laughed. He raised his glass, clinking it against Carter's, in a public affirmation. He was the master. She was the project. His to mold, his to improve. He had put her in her place, and now his court jester was confirming the new order. Ada's expression did not flicker. She did not look at Carter. She did not look at Alaric. She simply watched the bubbles rising in her water glass as if they held the secrets of the universe. When the applause died, the wedding planner stepped forward. And now, a few words from the bride's guardian, Miss Martha Jennings. A ripple of polite, almost pitying curiosity went through the room. Who was this woman? The keeper of the simple girl. Martha walked to the podium, not with the swagger of the powerful, but with a quiet, grounded dignity that was in its own way far more commanding. She adjusted the microphone, her calm eyes scanning the sea of jewels and judgment before her. She did not look at the crowd. She looked only at Ada, and a small, infinitely proud smile touched her lips. "Good evening," Martha began, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the ambient clatter. "I am Martha Jennings. For the past 20 years I have had the profound honor of being Ada's guardian. But my role was more than that. I am the executor of a promise made to two extraordinary people who believed that character was more valuable than currency." She paused. Most of you here know Ada as Ada Waverly, the girl from Oregon. A simple story crafted for a simple, protected life. But life as we know is rarely simple. Her story did not begin in Oregon. It began in a world of profound silence, deep privacy, and immense generational responsibility. Her eyes swept the room, pausing for a fraction of a second on the table where Stephen Schwartzman sat with other financial heavyweights. Their polite, bored expressions were sharpening into focus, a subtle shift from social obligation to professional vigilance. Ada's family name, Martha stated, her voice resonating with the weight of history, is not Waverly, it is Vandeleur. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the tent, a collective sharp intake of breath. It wasn't a name from the glossy pages of Forbes or Vanity Fair. It was a name from the footnotes of history books, from the whispered legends of the world's oldest banking families. A name that meant a different stratosphere of wealth, one that didn't need to announce itself because it owned the airwaves. Alaric froze, staring at Martha. Vandeleur. He searched his memory. The name was a ghost, a myth. He'd heard it once in a hushed conversation in Zurich about a silent partner who had propped up a nation's currency. He'd dismissed it as folklore. Beside him, his mother Meredith had gone the color of her bone china plate. She knew exactly what the name meant. She knew it meant the Vaughan fortune was a rounding error. The Vandeleur legacy is not one of extravagance. Martha continued her voice, weaving a narrative that was rewriting the reality of everyone in the room. It is one of substance, of tradition. She gestured to Ada. This dress she wears tonight. Some of you have seen simplicity. We see history. It was designed by her mother, Isabel, an exact replica of the gown every Vandeleur bride has worn for over 200 years. The silk is not merely silk. It is a specific thread, lune de Lyon, hand-spun and woven at the original family mill in Lyon, a mill gifted to the Vandeleur by Napoleon Bonaparte himself. The mill produces this fabric once a decade. It is not for sale at any price. This dress is not a statement against wealth. It is the very definition of it. A fortune so vast it has no need for a price tag. The silence was absolute, now thick and heavy with the weight of revelation. Every eye was on Ada on the simple dress. It was no longer a rag. It was a relic, an artifact of a power so immense it was terrifying. Alaric stared at it, at the soft ivory glow, and felt a cold dread creep up his spine. This was the garment he had called a bedsheet. Ada's parents, Alistair and Isabel Vandeleur, believed that true character is forged in the crucible of normalcy, far from the gilded key of obscene wealth. Martha said, her voice softening with memory. In his final letter, Alistair wrote, "Let her find a partner who sees the light in her soul, not the gold in her vault." After their tragic passing, I honored that wish. I raised Ada in seclusion to allow her to become a woman of substance before she took her rightful place as a woman of means. Her gaze now hard as diamond fell on Alaric. It appears they were wise to be cautious. The blow was surgical. Alaric flinched, the public rebuke stinging more than any financial loss. But, Martha announced, her voice rising with purpose, Ada's period of quiet is over. As stipulated in her father's trust upon her marriage, she formally assumes control of the entire Vandeleur estate, an estate managed through a private holding company, structured for absolute discretion. She paused, letting the suspense build until it was unbearable. She delivered the final fatal words. A company some of you may know by its operational name, Ethelred Holdings. This time the reaction was audible. A roar of shock, of disbelief. Ethelred Holdings, the ghost in the machine. A predator fund that moved with the stealth and lethality of a phantom submarine, acquiring companies, shifting markets, its ownership a complete mystery. It was the stuff of Wall Street horror stories. And it was her. As if on cue, the lights in the marquee dimmed, and the large video screen behind the bridal table, which had been displaying a tasteful monogram, flickered to life. The severe silver-haired face of Jean-Luc Dubois filled the screen. The skyline of Zurich, precise and orderly, was framed behind him. The air grew 10 degrees colder. "Good evening," Dubois said, his French-accented English clipped and emotionless. "I am Jean-Luc Dubois. For 20 years I have had the honor of serving as chairman of the board for Ethelred Holdings, awaiting this very day." Alaric felt the blood drain from his face. He was going to be sick. He knew Dubois. Everyone knew Dubois, the most feared and respected corporate lawyer in Europe, a man who didn't negotiate. He issued terms of surrender. On behalf of the board, Dubois continued, his eyes like chips of granite. "I am here to ratify Madame Vandeleur's first official act as our new principal. In her own words, A wedding should be marked by a meaningful gift. His gaze seemed to penetrate the screen and lock directly onto Alaric. As such, 1 hour ago, Ethelred Holdings completed 2 significant transactions. First, we acquired a 90% controlling stake in the Banque de Genève Privée. Alaric's hand shot out to grip the table, his knuckles white. His primary lender, the bank that held the paper on nearly every leveraged deal that had built Vaughan Capital. He wasn't just in debt, he was in her debt. Second, Dubois went on relentlessly. We have completed the acquisition of a 51% stake in Titan Industries. The sound in the room was a collective roar of disbelief and understanding. Titan Industries. Alaric's whale. The hostile takeover that was meant to be his crowning achievement. For a year, he had been battling a mysterious, infinitely deep-pocketed rival bidder who thwarted him at every turn. He turned his head slowly, mechanically, to look at his wife. The rival was her. The entire battle had been a game to her. Dubois's final words were delivered with the cold precision of a guillotine. Banque de Genève and Titan Industries now fall under the portfolio of Ethelred Holdings. All operational authority for both now rests with our principal, Madame Vandeleur. He gave a slight, formal bow of his head. Congratulations on your wedding, Madame, and welcome to the helm. The screen went black. A maelstrom of activity erupted. Reporters in the back were shouting into their phones. Carter Hayes looked like he'd seen a ghost. Meredith Vaughan was clutching her chest, her face the color of ash. And Alaric. Alaric Vaughan, the king, sat utterly incandescently broken. He slowly turned his head to look at his wife. The woman he had mocked, belittled and humiliated. She wasn't his project. She wasn't his accessory. She was his owner. Ada met his empty stare, her expression one of pure, unadulterated power. She serenely picked up her father's pen from the table, its gold nib glinting like a shard of ice in the candlelight. As I said, Alaric, she said, her voice a soft, devastating whisper that only he could hear. Class is now in session. Your education begins now. The aftermath of Dubois's message wasn't chaos. Chaos is messy, undirected. This was a precise, controlled demolition. The low hum of whispers instantly ceased, replaced by the sharp, distinct sounds of a world reordering itself, the clink of a fork dropping onto a plate, a choked gasp from a society columnist, the frantic, silent tapping of thumbs on screens as brokers were summoned and portfolios checked. Every person in that tent who mattered understood that the ground had not just shifted beneath their feet. It had been replaced by a chasm, and Ada Vandeleur was standing calmly on the other side. Alaric remained in his chair, but the world had tilted on its axis, and he was sliding off. The face of Jean-Luc Dubois, the boogeyman of European finance, was seared into his vision. His lender, his takeover target. A two-pronged attack executed with such brutal, silent efficiency it was almost beautiful. He felt a wave of nausea. He looked at Carter Hayes, who was staring at him, mouth agape, the smugness wiped from his face, replaced by a primal fear. His mother Meredith looked as if she had aged a decade, her hand still clutching the Vaughan diamonds at her throat, as if to ensure they were still real. They felt cheap now. Everything felt cheap. Slowly, as if moving through deep water, Alaric pushed back his chair. The scrape of its legs on the polished floor was obscenely loud in the tomb-like silence. He rose his bespoke suit, suddenly feeling like a straitjacket. He had to get to her. He had to fix this. Everything in his life was a negotiation, a deal to be made. This had to be the same. He was Alaric Vaughan. He didn't lose. He walked toward her, his path clearing as guests scrambled to get out of his way, not out of respect, but as if he were a contagion. His mind raced, cycling through a Rolodex of strategies. Grovel, apologize, threaten, seduce. The dealmaker's brain was whirring, but the code was corrupted. The data was all wrong. He was operating on a faulty premise that he held any cards at all. He stopped before her, a supplicant before a queen. Ada hadn't moved. She sat with the serene posture of a monarch, the vintage Mont Blanc held loosely in her fingers. She looked up at him, and her eyes held no anger. They held nothing but a profound, chilling clarity. "Ada," he began, his voice a raw, unfamiliar rasp. "Baby, I had no idea." He reached for her hand, a desperate, instinctual gesture to reclaim some piece of the woman he thought he knew. She drew her hand back, a small, simple movement that was more effective than a slap. The rejection was absolute. "That is the point, Alaric," she said, her voice level. "You had no idea. You didn't care to know. When you looked at me, you didn't see a person. You saw a blank canvas on which to paint your own masterpiece. A project, as your friend so aptly put it." "No, that's not true. I love you." The words burst from him loud and hollow. In his own ears they sounded like a desperate lie. This is incredible. Ada, think of what this means. What you have, what we now have. We can be unstoppable, Vaughan. Capital and Ethelred Holdings, together. No one could touch us. This is the biggest deal of our lives. He was trying to sell her, to pitch her on a future he had just tried to build on her humiliation. The arrogance was so ingrained he couldn't see the absurdity of his own words. A small, sad smile touched Ada's lips, a fleeting ghost of pity. "There is no we, Alaric," she said softly, but each word was a hammer blow. "You shattered that possibility an hour ago when you chose your ego over my heart, when you decided that the opinion of these people," she gestured vaguely at the stunned crowd, "mattered more than the woman you were about to marry. The real Alaric Vaughan is the one who laughed at this dress, the one who values a brand above a person. I was an idiot, a fool. I'm sorry," he pleaded, his voice cracking the desperation raw and ugly. "I was performing for them, for my mother. It wasn't real. Please, Ada, let me make it up to you. Let me prove it." "There is nothing to fix," she said, her calm unwavering. "The damage is done, and it was instructive. Now there are only new terms. Our marriage will continue for now. Appearances, as you know, are everything." Her eyes flickered with a cold fire. "You will be the devoted husband. You will smile for the cameras. You will fetch my wrap when I am cold. You will play your part flawlessly." She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping into an intimate, terrifying whisper. "And in return, Vaughan Capital will continue to operate. You will retain your title as CEO. You will keep your corner office for now. But you are CEO in name only. Every significant decision, every hire above a certain salary grade, every acquisition, every press release will cross my desk for approval. My desk, Alaric. You are no longer the king of your company. You are its highest paid employee, and you work for me." The finality of it crushed him. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a verdict delivered without malice, but with the unassailable weight of fact. This was the new reality. He could feel the eyes of everyone on him. Alaric Vaughan, the master of the universe, was being neutered in front of the very world he had conquered. A last pathetic flicker of his former self sparked within him. "And if I don't?" he whispered the question, tasting of ash. Ada's expression hardened, the last vestiges of softness vanishing. She held up the pen, its gold nib glinting like the tip of a dagger. "If you don't," she said, her voice deadly quiet, "then Mr. Dubois, at my command, will issue a margin call on every dollar of debt held by Banque de Genève tomorrow morning at 9:01 a.m. Not just for Vaughan Capital, but your personal lines of credit as well. I will liquidate your assets. I will dismantle your company piece by piece and sell the remnants to your most hated rival for $1. And you will be left with nothing but this suit and the global public memory of how your bride in her simple handmade dress dismantled your entire world because you were cruel to her." She placed the pen down gently on the table. "The choice," she finished, "is yours." He stared at her, the woman he thought he knew, the woman who was a complete and terrifying stranger. A goddess of vengeance in an ivory silk gown. He was trapped, checkmated in a game he never even knew he was playing. He had mocked her dress and handed her the sword to sever his own puppet strings. His world wasn't just collapsing. It had already been conquered and occupied. The fight went out of him. The air left his lungs in a shuddering sigh. His shoulders, which had always been squared with the arrogance of a conqueror, slumped in defeat. Slowly, defeatedly, he nodded, a single jerky motion of utter surrender. Ada watched him for a moment longer, her face unreadable. Then she stood, her movements graceful and deliberate. She turned away from her broken husband and addressed the stunned, silent crowd. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice projecting a calm authority that filled the vast tent. "My husband and I are very grateful for your good wishes. Please enjoy the rest of the evening." She then turned not to the dance floor, but towards the wide, moonlit exit, with Martha falling into step just behind her. The guests parted like the Red Sea, their faces a mixture of terror and rapt fascination. She didn't look back. The king was dethroned. The jester was in his place. And the queen in her simple silk dress had just begun her reign. So the wedding is over, but the marriage has just begun. Alaric Vaughan got the billionaire bride of his dreams, but at a price he never imagined his freedom. He's trapped in a golden cage, a CEO who has to ask his wife for permission, a husband who is nothing more than an employee. Ida Waverley, now Vandeleur, proved that the ultimate power isn't loud, flashy, or covered in diamonds. It's quiet, it's patient, and it wears a simple dress. What do you think will happen next? Will Alaric ever earn back a shred of respect? Or is he destined to be her puppet forever? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of epic revenge, make sure to hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves a good drama. And please subscribe to the channel for more stories where the underestimated come out on top.